All right, so this knife thoughts video is going to be a look at this knife, and you can see that this is the Milwaukee FastBack. And first of all, this knife was loaned to me for review from a student at the gym that I teach and work at. So I really appreciate that. And it's a cool knife. It's a knife that I don't really have any utility knives like this. I've given them as gifts. I just don't typically carry them, but it's a pretty cool one, to be honest. And there's some interesting features to it. I don't know the price on this knife. I didn't look at it. I typically don't when someone loans a knife because I like to just, have kind of a clear, open, biased look at it. So first of all, this knife is a button lock, and you actually can't open it without depressing the button lock. So it locks it closed, which as a utility knife, something you might use in a trade, I think that that's a good feature. You can get it out quickly, but you don't want it to come out without meaning to. So it's an interesting feature, not something you see on EDC type button lock knives. But you press the button lock and it pretty much falls out, as you can see. And then there is a nail nick here. As you'll see in a second, I don't think that the nail nick is ultra necessary or useful because when it's fully closed, the nail nick won't open it. When you press the button, it pretty much comes past where the nail nick becomes useful because, as you can see, the nail nick actually gets covered up by the handle as it's opening. But you open it all the way up, and as you can see, it holds normal utility blades. Now, the way I would open this and the way I have is by depressing the lock and kind of swinging it open. And to be honest, it has a pretty good fidget factor. People talk about fidget factor. It's fun to open and close and very easy. It's smooth. Interestingly, when I saw how smooth and easy it was to fling open and closed, I thought for sure that there would be blade play, but at least when locked, there isn't any blade play. But it is really easy to open and close once you get used to it. Depress it, swing it closed, let it, undepress, and then depress it, swing it open, and it opens really easily. So pretty cool on that, actually. On the way home after the student loaned it to me, I was just swinging it open and closed the whole time. But it does lock up really solidly. Like I said, no blade play in either direction, side to side or forward and back. And then there's a couple things to notice once it's open here with the blade. So obviously the blades are replaceable because it uses utility blades. And the way you replace those is you depress this and it pulls out. So this button right here, it has a shroud so that it's not going to get depressed accidentally, which I think is a good call. That way you're not just cutting and it gets depressed and comes out. But it is easy to depress when you're doing it purposefully, and you just slide the blade back in, and let me make sure I get it in there right. Like I said, I don't use these a whole lot. Oh, there we go. So you slide it back in and it locks it back in place. So it's easy to, to take the blade out and replace it with a different blade, as you can see. And one of the nice things with these utility knives is you can use both sides of it. Although, one of the things I've always wondered about on these ones where they're replaceable is, isn't this, screw going to hit the edge? And I think it does kind of hit the edge, but, probably not a huge deal. It's going to still cut okay. Like a lot of utility knives, one of the reasons I don't typically carry them is because in front of this post, which is, how deep you're going to be able to get the blade into something that you're cutting, you only get about 1/2 inch. Even, if you're able to get it all the way, it's 1 inch, something like that, a little longer than 1 inch probably. So it's mostly, like I said, it's a utility knife. So for cutting cardboard, particle board, whatever you're going to cut, not necessarily for, carving or something like that. But it would work fine for that, scoring cuts and things like that. And then interestingly, it also has this little kind of cord or seatbelt type cutter where there's a part of the blade exposed. The interesting thing with that is that it would just kind of help to hold the thing in place while you're doing it because the rest of the blade is still exposed. So not that that's like a safety seatbelt cutter. You wouldn't probably want to cut a seatbelt that was around somebody with that because the blade would be sticking out. But it is, a feature there. Another interesting feature here is that it holds an extra blade in there. So if you look here, there's a little spring, and what you do is you pull this spring out, and then you can lift this up out. And so you have an extra blade, which is a nice thing. I think if you're, using this for cutting particle board or something that's a little bit more abrasive, even than cardboard, it's nice to have an additional one so that you don't have to find one during the day when you're, working or whatever. And then you pull this back out, which is a little bit kind of, I was a little bit worried about stabbing myself while I was doing that, but you pull that back out, and then I had a little bit of trouble figuring this out. You push this down in, and it doesn't automatically lock. You actually have to lift this up and push it in. Let me see if I can get it to work. Yeah, there you go. So you kind of lift this spring up, and so it's pushing both this direction and downward. But it is kind of cool that it holds that extra blade in there. Now, as you can see, it also has, and I'm going to close it while I show this. I don't know what that means. Something about locking, I think. Oh, it's showing the features. It shows here that there's a blade. I just noticed these. Shows here that there's an extra blade. I think this is showing the lock. Yeah, that's what it means. And then there's a bottle opener, which I'll show in a second. I don't actually see a symbol to designate this, but there is a bit driver. And if you're using this knife in a trade and your work, that's probably another thing that's pretty useful. And the interesting thing about this is it does have a liner lock. So you open it up and you can see in there that it's on phosphor bronze washers, which is nice. Kind of a little bit of a surprise to me. It's not on Teflon, it's on phosphor bronze, but it has a liner lock. It opens and it's magnetic. It's a pretty strong magnet. I think it also has little, detent type things in there, but it comes with this bit, which is I think that the person who loaned it to me said number 2. I don't know bit sizes, but both a flathead and a Phillips. And you can, switch it, and it's a 1/4 inch, so you can, use other size bits as well if you have them. But aside from, having the liner lock at full open, it interestingly, and I think in a pretty good, feature, has a detent at half open. So almost like a half stop. It has this detent. And so you could use it in an L shape, to get a little bit more torque to it. So that's another feature there. And then, as you kind of already saw, the last feature here is there's a bottle opener. So once you get done with work, you can, open your beverage and, celebrate being done with work. So I thought that was a funny little addition. And then it does come with a wire pocket clip. It's tipped down only. I think on this knife, it's a fine choice. You pull it out of your pocket and your thumb is pretty much right at that already. Now I typically prefer tip up, but like I say, I don't think that it's a big deal on a utility knife like this. One last thing here that's interesting, if you've watched my videos, you know that I don't mind plastic handles. Speaking of plastic, this part of this thing is also plastic. The back is metal, but this part is plastic. Maybe that helps with not dulling the edge. But if you've watched my videos, you might know that I don't mind plastic handled knives. I like them typically. The interesting thing with this knife is it feels a little different than like your normal kind of plastic that's used on knife handles. Not necessarily in a bad way. It feels solid enough. I don't really have any, feel any flimsiness in it. I mean, it does have liners, but it does feel a little different. So just a different texture to it. But overall, I think, if you're looking for a utility knife that almost kind of, moves towards being having some of the cool factor of an EDC knife with, the very smooth and solid opening and lockup, but also being able to change the blades, use the strap cutter, have a blade backup, which is kind of a cool feature, and have a bit driver on there. This is kind of an interesting knife. Maybe something that I would put in my car or in my toolbox type deal. That way I don't have to, mar up a more EDC type knife. So again, this is the Milwaukee FastBack, and I want to thank again Rick for loaning this knife. I always love to see knives, especially a knife that I wouldn't typically see. So it's always a pleasure to get to check out a knife that's loaned to me. So if you enjoyed this video, if it was helpful, go ahead and like it, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell for notifications. Also check out my social media at Knife Thoughts and my website, knifethoughts.com. And last but not least, don't forget to go out and do good.